researchers. I'm sitting here working on my CRO startup. It's actually been 2 years now. It's a 2-year startup. Just going through the big picture process after study design. So this is assuming that you've got the protocol designed, that you've met with the FDA, that you've discussed what they want to see in the protocol, the primary objectives, secondary objectives, all the safety stuff. If you are a study sponsor and this is your first go around, the very next thing you need to do is get the protocol IRB approved, and then you need to start rapidly identifying potential investigators and potential sites and sending them CDAs and sending them the protocol synopsis and then sending them feasibility surveys. And then you need to conduct these site selection visits on site or remotely. After you've reviewed all the site selection visit reports, so the CRAs need to submit their site selection visit reports as well as the essential documents they've collected from the site, so the CVs, the CLIA, good clinical practice certificates, SOPs, especially for the process of consent. The project manager needs to approve sites, and then the sponsors decide which sites they're going to utilize for the study. Then from those sites that are going to be utilized, from those sites that have been selected, we need to conduct site initiation visit. And this is where all those sites are going to be trained on the protocol, and we're going to make sure that all the regulatory documents have been completed, and we're going to make sure that the contract and budget are in place and the site is ready to screen patients. Now, before that happens, we got to talk regulatory. So let's talk regulatory. Before your SIV and after your site selection visit, you need to send the sites their startup regulatory packet. And even prior to that, you've got to notify the IRB, if you're using a central IRB, which sites you're going to be using so that the IRB sends you the bill, not the sites, because the sites will not pay IRB or any vendor. So now the regulatory documents that you need to send the sites include this IRB submission form that the sites can either get directly from the IRB website, if it's a central IRB, or from you through the IRB, whatever is easier. I've seen both happen. The 1572, you need to send it out to all the sites. They need to complete that. You need to collect, by the way, you need to collect copies of all this and put them in your trial master file. In box 6 of the 1572, any investigators, sub-investigators that are in that box need to sign financial disclosure forms. Another thing you gotta do is send the site the regulatory binder, which includes the protocol signature page, investigator brochure signature page, a delegation of duties log, a training log, and any other specific log, screening and enrollment log that the study will use. And so far, all this stuff has to get done before the site initiation visit. And we haven't even gotten into the contract and budget. You have to create and have an accepted contract and budget with each investigative site prior to them starting on the study. And this, again, occurs before the site initiation visit. This entire process is called the study startup process, and it's notorious for having delays, and this is complicit in increased cost for sponsors, because any time during this period that is not spent on screening patients in the study is wasted time for the sponsor. So regulatory and contracts and budgets need to get done, completed prior to site initiation visit. Now we're going to get into one more thing before SIV. One more thing we're almost forgetting, which again you have to pay for, is the EDC, the electronic data capture system. It's much easier to use EDC than paper CRFs because you're going to be able to get data in real time. It's going to be easy on your biostatistics. It's going to be easier to submit the data and to track the data to the FDA. We're not going to get into the benefits of EDC, but it's 2018. Everyone's using EDC. You have to get an EDC system. You've got to pay for it. You've got to negotiate with that vendor how you're going to pay for it. Do you pay per site? Do you pay per subject? How do you do it? You got to give the sites access to the EDC, and you've got to actually create the database. Like, what are you collecting? It has to match the protocol. So that all has to be done prior to the SIV as well, and the sites should be trained on using the EDC also. Now that you've got all of that done, it's time to initiate the sites and do the site initiation visit, which is essentially making sure that everything we just mentioned has been completed, that everyone at each investigative site that is on the delegation of duties log has been trained on the protocol and is capable of and competent enough to handle their duties. You make sure that the site is trained on the protocol one final time, and you make sure that all these vendors, everyone's trained on these vendors and know how to use the vendors. And if the EDC includes an IWRS, that's great. But if they don't, you need an IWRS system to enroll patients, to randomize patients, and to manage investigational product. So that's another thing you have to make sure sites are trained on. So after the SIV, if everything is to the sponsor's liking and all documents and logs are complete and training to every single vendor and system is in place for the relevant staff, then the sponsor will give the green light to that site as to whether they can start screening patients, or there's action items for the site to complete prior to them being allowed to screen patients. And this will be determined from the site initiation visit monitoring report, which the CRA should submit to the team lead or the project manager and eventually to the sponsor prior to the site actually being activated. So sometimes the sites get activated right away, and other times there's action items that need to be completed prior to the site being allowed to screen patients. The next video on this series, we're going to get into actually running the study once the sites are up and running and enrolling patients, and we're going to get into recruitment and deviations and retrainings and SAEs, and that's going to be an entire other video, similar length probably. So stay tuned for that, but hopefully we're able to learn a couple things about the study startup process.